IMF chief Dominique Strauss-Kahn was arraigned today on charges of attempted rape and is being held in New York in jail without bail. This while European finance ministers were meeting in Brussels to press Greece for more spending cuts and to approve a bailout plan for Portugal. Joining us now to talk about the impact of Strauss-Kahn's absence from those talks is Mark Dow. He's a portfolio manager at Pharo Management. He's also a former economist at the IMF, which is one of the reasons that you sort of popped into our collective head this morning. Mark, let me ask first off, what difference will this make to the talks for Greece? Because obviously there's a very serious situation going on in Europe. And to have someone this important absent from the talks just raises a lot of questions.
It's really important. I think it's less important in terms of substance, though there are substantive implications, than it is in terms of personality. I mean, when you have someone like him who knows the landscape, he knows the personalities, he knows where the bodies are buried, he knows the preferences of the constituencies that the leaders have to deal with, that's extremely important, not only to make the case for certain things that are sometimes hard to accept, but also to broker deals. So when Angela Merkel falls in disaccord with Sarkozy, he can get them back on track. And you need that degree of credibility. It's not clear that there's someone else out there who can step into that role and do that. And we know the Europeans, that their biggest problem on the policy side is coordination. You need the person there to herd the cats.
It's interesting. He has this reputation, right, for knowing everybody, for being able to bring people together. But Sarkozy obviously would have been his opponent were he not, were his sort of political career not ruined over the weekend. How do they get along in that case?
Well, I mean, that's a game, a chess game at several different levels.
Right.
Because on the one hand, you could say that Sarkozy was reluctant to see Strauss-Kahn take the merit, take the credit for putting something together. On the other hand, something needed to get done. So it works at a couple different levels. The other interesting aspect is that now that DSK Strauss-Kahn is not in the picture, it might free up Sarkozy to look at more options, as long as he can create the appearance that he's the leader, that it's his idea, right? So up until now, he was relatively resistant to restructuring the Greek debt earlier than was the case before, because he didn't want any disturbances before the elections. But now, if he can make it look like his idea, maybe he'll be more amenable to restructuring the debt earlier than would otherwise have been the case.
By the way, here we see him being taken away here, and there have been now other people coming out and saying he had wronged them in some way, or other women coming out and saying that he had wronged them in some way or another as well. Is this the kind of thing where people have been talking about this kind of under their breath for years, and now it's finally sort of exploded?
I don't know. I don't know the particulars of this or anything about the merits of the case. But the important thing for me as an investor is to look at what the implications are going to be for Europe going forward.
Let's talk about John Lipsky then. We've had him on the program a number of times. He comes talks to us here at Bloomberg a lot. Is he going to be able to do the job, even if it's only for the interim, well enough to save Greece, to save the European Union?
Well, I don't think it's a matter of. I don't think it's quite that dire that the change of a person will save or sink Europe or Greece. But it will change the path to some degree. And he just doesn't know the landscape as well. I mean, he knows the players and he's familiar with the backdrop, but he just doesn't have that European feel that you often need to get the deals done, to broker it, to bring people together. And I think that's going to be sorely missed. But on the other hand, you can see that the body politic in Europe is shifting towards the recognition that Plan A wasn't working, that Greece is not going to be able to adjust their way out of this problem. Right now, they're still pretending that with more financing, Greece will make it, but what they're really doing is trying to put the final bricks in the firewall so that when they get to the restructuring in 2012 or 2013 or wherever it might be, it's the chances of contagion are minimal.
Let me ask you about the Spiegel report from last weekend. I think you were on Pim Fox's show last week talking about this a little bit, but what do you think about the fact or the threat that Europe could actually pull out of the European currency?
I think that was talk. I mean, if you think about it, what's the only card that Greece can play at the European level? Chaos. They can say, well, we're going to mess you up. We're going to walk away, and we're going to make sure that there is contagion, so that you're going to listen to us and you're going to help us out. You're going to be more cooperative than you want to be, because what we're seeing right now is the Europeans say, Greece, we need a pound of flesh. You need more adjustment. We don't want to give you any more money, or we don't want to minimize the money that we want to give you. And the Greeks are pushing back, saying we can't take any more adjustment. So the card that they can play is threatening to leave the Eurozone. And it might have been mentioned in passing, and I'm sure some study was done by some official in the finance ministry in Germany to see what the implications might have been. But I think it was little more than idle chatter, at least at this stage.
What about, speaking of idle chatter, the political situation as far as the head of the IMF? I mean, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, and I think someone's mentioned Christine Lagarde as a possible replacement, both French. Why French all the time? Why European? Why don't we get a U.S. head of the IMF?
Well, the tacit agreement has tended to be, since the Bretton Woods system was set up, that a European runs the IMF and that an American runs the World Bank. Clearly, with the growth, the rapid growth and integration of the emerging markets, it makes progressively more sense to have someone other than a European or an American run those places. But I think right now, because the main source of systemic risk is Europe, and Lagarde is supremely qualified for that job. And my guess is her chances of getting accused of sexual harassment are pretty minimal. She would be a great candidate for that. So it makes a little bit more sense right now to have a European, even though over the long term we should probably see a transition to, let's say, a more diverse set of candidates.
Will the IMF, the focus transition, because it has been on emerging markets, it has been on developing nations, and now, of course, the focus is needed in Europe. Do you think it shifts back once we have everything taken care of?
Well, it might have. We're seeing a major seismic shift in the world. All right, the emerging markets have plugged into the grid, and that's going to continue. That's a secular process that's in its early innings. And the developed economies are suffering under the strain of their old and creaky systems. They promise too much to their constituents, so whether it's in the U.S. or Europe, and they're not getting the kind of growth to generate the revenue necessary to make good on those promises. So a lot of adjustment is ahead, both in Europe and in the U.S. So there's a big shift in the way the world works, and I think that has to be taken into account at some point at the IMF.
All right, Mark, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Mark Dow there from Pharo Management.